The biggest problem you have when joining data together in large enterprise context is you don't know what information you want to extract. You want to lose as little information as possible, and in most cases, you want to fix the information so that it then becomes useful.
And today we're in Singapore with a super interesting guest who is Rishi. Rishi is the CEO and co-founder of Southbridge AI.
A lot of what we're working on is building data tooling as the first step that's designed to be AI first rather than human first. So a lot of our work has been rebuilding data tools from the ground up to slice, move, read, understand large data sets. And I mean gigabytes or even petabytes even, but with an AI first positioning. And it's either redirected all of what you're doing or it's shaved weeks off of you having to rediscover and make those. So I think that's part of the reason why people are congregating. I mean, on top of that, I think the US is also an early adopter market for a lot of technology.
Of course. I'm just curious, what do you maybe look for now when you hire some engineers?
So there's a few things, but I'd say the one that's at the very top of that line is, it can be best described as fluidity, right? Ability to pick up new tools very quickly and sort of change paradigms very quickly, because I think that's the world we're going into.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the CTO Show hosted by TechVibe. I'm your host, Philip An. And today we're in Singapore with a super interesting guest who is Rishi. Rishi is the CEO and co-founder of Southbridge AI. So welcome to the show, Rishi.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, Rishi, really great to have you. I think I first heard of you when you were at your previous company, Greywing, because you guys went through YC, but now you also have a new AI company. But maybe let's start from that previous company and what you guys did and how you got into entrepreneurship and take it from there.
Oh boy. Okay. So those are longer and shorter answers.
Yeah.
I think I've been in entrepreneurship because it's hard to not want to have solutions, and then the logical next step to having a solution to something or trying to build a solution to something is put an entity around it and then try and go make it a more of a real thing. So I've been doing that for a while. Greywing started out because I met someone amazing. His name's Nick Clark. He ended up being our CEO at an accelerator here in Singapore. And then he had, almost a decade and a half in shipping at the time.
Wow.
And so it was one of those industries. And I've always really enjoyed being able to understand completely new industries. I came in as a complete neophyte.
Wow.
Into that space, which is very insular. There's an insane amount of information you need to know. Most of the people you interact with on the customer side are people that have been sailing for 20 years.
Wow.
And have just been and seen a lot more than you have. But we felt that there's something that could be added, because the way that ships work, especially very, very large ships, is that it's always a resource optimization problem. They need to go from point A to point B. And so if you think of airplanes, it's more complicated than that. And in between doing that, they've got to take people off. They've got to put people on, they've got to refuel, they've got to clean, they've got to do n number of things before they go from point A to point B.
And these are container ships, right? These are like the big ones that you associate with global trade?
So no, not just container ships. We work with chemical tankers, product tankers, research vessels. And in a lot of ways, those can be even harder to operate because they have fewer crew. They tend to be more dangerous. All of the equipment tends to be even more expensive. So like a chemical tanker, for example, a container ship largely holds on to containers, and that has revolutionized global trade, and it makes things very easy.
I see.
But when you talk about raw materials, right, you might be carrying incredibly unstable and dangerous chemical precursors. You might be carrying something in between crude and like whatever the refined part of that might be. So these are really, really hard to operate.
I see.
And so then the costs go up.
I see.
And they keep going up.
And so what was Greywing helping these ships do?
We've done a number of things over the years. It started out on one small part of it and then grew into just adding more things. And this connects to Southbridge as well, because that went up exponentially in complexity, right? Because we started out trying to figure out if we can look at the route of a vessel and figure out how safe it was. That was where we started. And
so this would be like storms or other obstacles, basically?
Storm, weather, but also piracy. Was a pretty big problem back when we started. Now that's changed quite a bit. COVID did a massive number on how these things work. So before a voyage is conducted, you always need to know what your route is like. because you might run into pirates, you might go through high risk areas. And
Wow.
it's not just from a safety standpoint, it's also from everything else around a vessel. If you are going to go through a high risk area, there's protocol that needs to be followed, there's insurance that needs to be purchased, there's all these other things that need to happen on a ship before you can even do that.
Wow.
So we started there. We integrated GPS data. We built one of the first proper routing systems for shipping that was open source. So even it's live even today. If
So
you
like
wanna-
Google Maps for
Google Maps for shipping, because
Right.
you would think that, or, I mean, I say this because I was an idiot going in, right? You would think that it's just the water, the same
Right.
way that, in the air, you would just go from here to there.
Right.
If you want to go from here to here, you just do. But no, there's currents, there's channels, there's shipping highways, there are protected zones.
Wow.
So routing on the water is almost as complicated as routing on the road. So that's the first thing we built. And then we just slowly started adding more things on. We added on marine flights from multiple vendors and multiple systems. Maritime is one of the oldest industries in the world. So it operates completely differently, which I didn't know at the time. Like they have their own flights. They
Wow.
have their own layer of flights and codes and things that exist primarily for them. So we integrated those. We also integrated things like fuel tracking, engine consumption, all of these different factors to try and put it into effectively planning multidimensionally for a ship and going, well, these are the right decisions to make. It's also a very, very decentralized industry, which makes things way harder because there's coordination. Like, if you go out to the bay and you just look at any one of those ships, the average ship that you're looking at might have 7 to 8 different companies that sit in 7 to 8 different countries involved in the day-to-day operations of that ship.
Wow.
There might be a company that's dealing with the people. There might be a company that's dealing with the training. One company is dealing with the cargo. Another one that's figuring out the business contracting of that vessel, so on the day-to-day. Another one's dealing with the fuel. So it's very decentralized. That means an insane number of emails have to go back and forth for every decision. A lot of buying has to happen. Large companies like Maersk and maybe CMA tend to be a bit more top-down, but the industry itself is just very decentralized.
Wow. So it seems like a very complex global coordination problem that you guys have to
It
do.
absolutely is.
I see.
And this is the stuff that has to happen day to day critically, right? And we saw that happen during COVID. Around COVID, we also switched a bit more into tracking risk from pandemics, right? We had a massive crisis that developed in the oceans, which is that the same problem that affected you and me, where we couldn't travel. For us, it was comparatively luxury, right? We just couldn't go anywhere. But for people that work on ships that are understaffed, they need to be rotated out every 3 months.
Oh.
And suddenly, countries just stopped accepting that
Wow.
to route them home or
I
put
see.
new people on. So that meant that people were now stranded on ships for a year
Wow.
and a half, right? When their original rotation was designed for a 3-month level of work. So they'd work massive shifts for 3 months and they get to go off. So we had suicides, we had huge problems developing. So a lot of our work was trying to, you take the same technology that we had and figure out, hey, how can we get these people off and put new people on and keep everything functioning?
Wow.
That, yeah. Because I'm not saying we were a huge part of that. We did what we could, but it's because all of shipping kind of reconfigured that during COVID we didn't feel that. We kept hearing about supply chain issues, but most of us in most of the countries that we lived in could still reasonably get the things we needed to live, and that was because shipping really put the effort in.
Wow, that's incredible. So was Greywing your first startup?
Good question. Graving, I would say, it was my first proper startup. There was a company before that where we were focused entirely on fire detection using thermal cameras. It's actually really interesting because I recently did write about this because at the time we had spent a lot of time in development and work to go, how can we detect fires very accurately using this emerging technology of sort of thermal cameras, near infrared cameras, camera work. That work I then later was able to use in other industries and sort of other spaces, but it never went anywhere because the costs were so high in sort of trying to make that. And it was also always a question of who would buy it specifically.
I see.
Right? Because fire is a lot like security and cybersecurity, right? It's one of those things that everybody wants to kind of fold in a little bit, but the cost there isn't felt until you have an issue.
I see.
And so that was a complicated thing. But the really interesting part is we had, I don't know, thousands of lines of code trying to do this thing. This was what, 8 years ago? Like
Wow.
8 to 9 years ago? Today you can do it with like AI models just by asking.
Oh my gosh.
You just take that and you go, is there fire and what kind of fire is it?
Yeah.
And it will tell you.
Wow.
So that's how far things have changed.
That's crazy. I'm just curious, maybe based on both of your experiences, right? Both Grey Wing and maybe some of this fire detection stuff. Like, what are some of the lessons that you learned, and how did that actually impact maybe what your company is building right now?
Oh, that's a really good question. The what we're doing now is directly connected to the pain point that I had, just as a CTO and as someone running tech teams. Um, we were effectively trying to solve that problem, right? And it's a problem that's plagued me, and I know now significantly more people now that I'm talking about it, through every single company and job that I have, right? I'll cover a few, right?
Yeah.
So I was in insurance and reinsurance for a while, and the biggest problem we had there is how to get human data formats, because humans are weird. Anything that we would touch, we turn into a canvas, right? So even spreadsheets, which you would think is just columns and rows, if you look at the spreadsheets that actually exist inside of companies, they look more like pieces of art than structured data, right? Because we
Right.
turn everything into a canvas,
Sure.
and it just goes all over the place because we want to encode that information. So taking that and then joining it together, unifying it, and the technical term would be ingest, getting it ingested into an operational format is where you spend most of your time. And that's repeatedly happened to me. Maybe I keep making that mistake. But I know I'm not the only one. Is because you go into an industry and you go, hey, this is something that technology can do now,
Right.
right? Maybe we can have better claims processing. Maybe we can figure out better risk modeling. Even
see.
something as simple as not even simple as say Lemonade or ACCO and a bunch of other people in the insurance space were doing at the time, which is, hey, we don't need antiquated old practices of risk modeling. We now have information from consumers as to what their actual behavior patterns are. So we don't need this old claims process of write everything out. Maybe we trust you, maybe we don't. We reject your claim. We can do all of that. And that's a good idea. It works. But what happens repeatedly, and it happened in insurance, happened in finance, happened in shipping, is you go in and you realize, yes, the actual logic of what you need to do is this big. But the problem is always turns into a data problem. Is we have hundreds of companies and consumers, and they all use different formats. Getting that data usable ends up being most of your engineering effort.
I see.
So same with Grey Wing. We had a lot of ideas which we delivered on and built really useful things.
Yeah.
But it was always bottlenecked. And I watched some of the smartest people I hired spent most of their time just cleaning the data.
So to give, maybe viewers a sense of like making it more tangible, right? Maybe
Yeah.
at Grey Wing, like what were some of the types of kind of unstructured data, or what are some of the formats that you guys had to standardize and process? And
That's a really good question. The term that we've started to use is semi-structured data, right? Which is not a common term. So because almost all of the information we got at Grey Wing was what I would call semi-structured. So unstructured data is where there's no discernible structure. It's mostly just human text, and you just put things together. Harry Potter is a good example. Structured data, on the other hand, you would think is very, very clean, organized data, right? But most of the time, the information that you get sits somewhere in between. It's, hey, this looks structured. This is a table.
Yeah.
But you can't make sense of it unless the guy who made it writes you a long email. So now that becomes semi-structured because it can't really exist one without the other,
Sure.
right? Or some of the information that we did get was, here's a bunch of schedules. Here's a bunch of voyage plans, which is where vessels are going to be,
Yeah.
ships are going to be, right? Or flight schedules. The problem is about, and visa information was a very common one. We wanted to figure out, and this is still an open problem, surprisingly. We just wanted to figure out if you want to go from point A to point B as a nationality of this type, what visas and restrictions you can encounter, right? We've had now, 20, 30 years of being in a globalized world. You'd think that was partly solved, that there would just be a database. There isn't, right? There are a number of wonderful organizations that self-report and put this information together.
Yeah.
But that information will change based on who is writing it that day. So it looks structured, but it's not. The date formats will change.
Oh, wow.
The way it's structured will change. The way that visas are considered will change. So it's a lot of things that look structured to human. Like we look at it and go, hey, that's structured.
I see.
But it's nowhere near usable for an automated system to work off of.
I see. So dumb question, but like, even in your visa example, right?
Yeah.
If I just plug that into ChatGPT or even, for example, other types of information, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't that AI model already tell me, or couldn't they already infer that there's some kind of structure and structure it for me already?
They absolutely could, right? So that's where I think there's a good number of startups, some of whom I know, that are doing this pretty successfully.
Yeah.
The problem with doing that at an enterprise level inside of a company is in most cases 80% of the work is knowing the output format of what you want out of that, right? So the ones you mentioned are ones that I would class more in the realm of extraction problems. So extraction problems are where you have a bunch of information and you need to get information out of it, but you know what you want, right? So you go, hey, I have a bunch of driver's licenses. I just want the license ID and the name. So
Yeah.
you know that, and LLMs are amazing for this.
Yeah.
There's still reliability things that need to get fixed, but models keep getting better.
Sure.
Everything keeps getting cheaper.
Yeah.
It's okay. We can do that. The biggest problem you have when joining data together in a large enterprise context is you don't know what information you want to extract. You want to lose as little information as possible, and in most cases, you want to fix the information so that it then becomes useful. So one example that I think everyone's familiar with personally is you have flight schedules
Yeah.
that flight information. You need to have the context to know, which humans will, that flight information is usually encoded in the time zone of the specific airport that is being touched.
Yes.
So if you have two times, that's not always obvious. And as you add in more legs and as you add in more trips and information, that's a problem. So of course you could then look at it, go to ChatGPT and say, well, keep track of this
Yeah.
and do it. That's step one, right? So you're effectively just doing that work all over again
I see.
in most cases, because when we had engineers and when we had people doing it, I've done this work myself many times. 80% of my time goes into just reading the data and figuring out all the intricacies of that data so that I can then figure out what the instructions are. They used to go to, data tools like, SQL tools and things like that.
Yeah.
Now they go to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But that time still isn't saved,
I see.
isn't just looking at that information.
Do these kind of new reasoning models, do they help with that kind of stuff? So for example, in the time zone thing, right? Wouldn't that reasoning model be able to actually look at that schedule and say like, oh, this is a flight schedule, therefore I think I should, do ABC?
So that's a really good point. And models are getting better. Models are getting better at being able to do and sort of look at data. But there's two massive problems that we run into. One is that the amount of data that a model can process and be intelligent about hasn't gone up that much.
I see.
Right.
So the context window.
Context window, but also usable context window.
I see.
Even since now, say you've got models with 2 million context length, but you
Yeah.
can't reason over the entire 2 million. That hasn't gone up by that much, right? Meaning if you're asking a more complicated task of going, hey, here's 20 different data sources that I want you to make a really good plan to
Yeah.
join together. And if they're about a mil, you already start seeing heavy intelligence degradation because they almost work like humans. It's weird. The more information you have to hold in working memory, the dumber you get.
Do you think that will improve as models get better?
It's definitely going to improve.
Okay.
But the nature of a couple of decades for humanity is we just have far more data than these things can even touch, right?
Got it.
Like a Gemini, I would say, is one of the best useful models today with a high context length. And that's 2 million, which is about, I would say, 4 to 8 megabytes. Your average enterprise data set we were working with was 100 times that, just one,
I see.
right? So we always just end up having more data.
Got it. So what's your approach? How do you guys do this, and how do you guys, solve this problem?
So we've been trying a few different approaches. The big one for us really is that models are getting smarter, but we need far better tooling that they can use to manipulate that data. And then these models need to either be retrained or taught how to use that tooling. So that's the core problem, right? Like you're a very, very smart person, but the way that you're going to work with any one of these tasks is very different if I gave it to you as just a sheet of paper in front of you, or I let you use Excel,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How quickly you can do it.
Of
And
course.
that changes at all levels of, if you didn't get much sleep today, so you're not feeling up to it, but there will still be a massive delta in how you deal with that. So a lot of what we're working on is building data tooling as the first step that's designed to be AI first rather than human first. We've been trying to take human first tools, which have a whole bunch of quirks and interesting things based on how humans work, right? And then trying to get AI to use those. But these things don't work the same way. So a lot of our work has been rebuilding data tools from the ground up to slice, move, read, understand large data sets. And I mean gigabytes or even petabytes even, but with an AI first positioning.
Do you mind giving an example of maybe how an AI first implementation of analyzing that petabytes of data would look like versus what a human would actually potentially do?
Okay, so you mean like the actual workflow for a data engineer or someone doing it would be compared to AI? Or
Yeah, or maybe what you guys would actually, the software that you guys are building, like how would that actually work versus what a human would.
Oh, cool. So I'll take a very small toy example, which is still pretty hard to get models to. So we're building up a benchmark to really cover a large swath of sort of problems like RKGI, and then we're now testing on that to sort of improve on it. This is the smallest one in the data set, which is a very personal one, right? Which is I have a few accounts as anyone who's existed for a while, a few bank accounts, and so I have to do budgeting on a. I don't do it as often as I want to. Or I should. Maybe let's say I do it. Let's say I do it. And the first thing I've got to do is I've got all of these different accounts, and the same thing happens at the company level, just far bigger.
Yeah.
The first thing I need to do is put them all together into one format.
Yeah.
That is incredibly difficult, right? And I'll tell you how I used to do it as a human. Is I would sit down and look at all the information, and I go, oh, hey, okay, Citibank really, really likes leaving multiple spaces in between months. They really like splitting out their transaction fees well ahead of the transaction. They use, and this is not, I'm not making this up, they use positives for debit and negative for credit.
Yeah, I see.
Not everybody does.
Yeah.
They have one field which embeds like the currency information directly into the number. And then they have another number next to it, which is maybe what they actually charge you. I don't know yet. And so in some cases, I can't even figure it out looking at the data, even though it's my transactions.
Yeah.
I go to the website, I read the thing, and then I come back and look at it.
I see.
And this is after 30 minutes of work. I have now sort of understood Citibank's one statement for one thing.
Wow.
Right? In some cases, and I'm not saying this is the case for them, it's also just hostile engineering because we've all built these data silos, right? So Citibank, if I have a different type of account, it's a different format of statement that I have to, and that's a PDF.
Yeah.
It's in a different format. So even say 5 documents, all I'm really looking for is that the base level is I just want a clean list of transactions.
Yeah.
And this is the simplest problem you can run into. And I encourage almost anyone to, if you want to know how hard this problem is, try it. Try it with ChatGPT, try it with other things, right? Because I'm really only looking for 3 things. I just want the date of the transaction. I want to know what transaction it was, and I want the number. That's really all I want, right?
Got it.
That's already pretty difficult to do at scale.
I see.
Even just human scale, individual scale. Now, the AI version of doing that would be, and this is where I'm covering some of the approaches that we have, is have very, very clean tooling that's designed. So the AI doesn't directly interact. The way we interact with AIs today is we take the data and we dump it into context.
Yes.
Right? We just go. And that works, but it degrades faster than you would think, right? This is an easy test to run. Take any kind of structured data that you're using to extract with OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these models. And it's not their fault. It's just the way these things work.
Yeah.
Take a small slice of it, give it to the model and ask a question or extract something. Take a far larger slice, anything close to context window and ask, and you will see degradation.
Yeah.
And so that's just going to consistently keep happening. In our case, it's a lot more fixed tool usage with high quality sort of data tools. So the model might go, hey, this is what my hypothesis about what this data is. So I might go, I know this is a date field. I know this is what this might be. I want you to use, structured data processing systems which can operate, 10 million times faster and validate, and then just tell me all the things that failed validation. And then rebuild and sort of reflect on that. One of our early papers was on just reflection as a concept and helping models get better on that.
Interesting.
And maybe with a few rounds of that, the model gets to a good enough understanding of just the shape of that data.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to look at the data.
Got it.
And this is a very compressed representation.
That's interesting.
Maybe in latent space, maybe in text. It's a compressed representation of what that data is, which now means that I can actually do 10 at the same time, or 20, or 30.
Yeah. Interesting. Does that mean that you guys will work with certain types of data, like financial data, transaction data, and it works well with those types and not other types, or?
So we're starting with formats that everyone has problems with. So it's more formats than types, right? So we're starting with sort of Excel, JSON.
I see.
Right, primarily, because both of those formats have been a pain for everyone, and PDFs to a certain extent, because they are very permissive formats. So it's data that looks structured, but because you can put anything in there, that's also meant that everyone's adopted them very easily. But because you can put anything in there, they are incredibly hard for computers to parse or even make sense of.
Got it.
So that's the type and structure of data that we're pulling in. And of course, then the applications just get really, really big. Normalizing health data is a pretty common one. Normalizing financial data is a pretty common one. extracting tables out of PDFs and actually joining them together with information from the PDFs. Parsing 10Ks is a pretty common one.
Yeah.
Most of the web today just outputs JSON, but with no real data as to how to use that JSON. So you could do a significant amount of tool automation, which I think is for personal individuals. I'm very excited for that. Whether we do it or not is the holy grail, is being able to say, hey, I want this to happen in Notion, WhatsApp, and XYZ.
Got it.
And today these are all web systems, and
Yeah.
they all already have amazing client-side APIs, but they don't publish the spec. But you're getting that information already, right?
Yeah.
But it's because we can't make sense of that data. It's too diverse that we have to go the long way around and have an AI take control of your mouse
Yeah.
to walk it up to the button and click it.
Yeah, I have seen now there's more and more startups that actually work with, allowing agents to actually navigate your web page more effectively and
Yes.
read your data and those kind of things. Yeah.
I think it's genuinely fun to watch, and I think there's a lot of potential there. But for me, granted, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
So to me, I'd rather just see the fact that our data interchange ecosystem has broken so much that all of these tools that are being used
Yeah.
are outputting high quality, reasonably structured data through an API.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't have the systems to be able to consume it directly. Like AI would be able to consume that data and use it directly. But instead we have to go through rendering it out into a UI just so another agent can take control of your computer
Right,
and move a mouse
exactly.
just to click a button. And all that button does is send an API request.
And that's why these things are so slow, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
but we have to do that today. We absolutely have to do that today. So it feels like we're going a long way around just to get back.
Interesting.
It's the same
Interesting.
thing.
I was going to actually ask as well, like, how do you guys sit in the ecosystem, right? Will you
Yeah.
guys actually integrate with third-party integrations like client CRM or their internal databases? Do you integrate with AI models? Like, where do you guys sit in the stack, maybe?
That's something that's still being somewhat decided. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what the considerations there are. Is as a startup, honestly, not even as a startup, as a company, all resources are finite,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
I think we have some of the best people to be able to build an end-to-end product here.
Yeah,
But that takes time away from solving what is already a pretty hard deep tech problem,
yeah,
which is getting models to be good at structured data and structured data manipulations. That's already a pretty hard problem. So we're having conversations to figure out where our time would be best spent. Because what we want to do is solve this problem to multiple nines of reliability
yes,
as much as possible.
yeah,
But as resources end up being finite, I think we're gonna be working on some research demos and previews as ways for you to test it. But the current conversations are to sit above the stack, closer to first mile data ingest, which is very, very close to data coming in, and to be that connector between that and all of the wonderful things you can do and all the wonderful tools that exist. Once your data is clean and ingested and connected up, you've got BI tools, you've got AI systems, you've got Glean and all of these different things that can happily consume that data, who've spent a lot of work making it a delight to use and work with that data. It's trying to get you from here to here,
yeah,
right? And it's also the same problem that we ran into at my last company, which I now see AI companies running into, is there just is that gap, right? The most common one that people are familiar with, but it happens everywhere else too, is that OCR to structured ingest part.
Yes.
Which is, you've got a bunch of PDFs and things with tables and structured data that need to be treated as structured data.
yeah,
You've OCR'd it, so now you've got 2 million tables, just independent 2 million tables. Currently there's no way to go from there
Yeah.
to being able to query that information.
yeah,
Even
exactly.
something as simple as, say, company earnings. Not all 10Ks report earnings the same way. I'm not even talking about WeWork, just not all companies even report them the same way, even though they are tables.
Yeah.
So are any of these individual tables structured? Yes. But can I search through all the earnings calls? No. So that gap,
That's interesting.
that's where we want to be sitting.
This episode is brought to you by TechVibe, your one-stop IT recruitment solution provider. We connect global companies with top tech talent across Southeast Asia. Whether you're looking for permanent hires, short-term contractors, or employer of record, EOR services, we've got you covered, especially in the IT and digital sectors. Thanks for tuning in. And now, enjoy the episode.
I know even in Asia, there's businesses that literally you just send them paperwork, the document, and they just scan it for you, right? And then after you have 1 petabyte of Google Drive files and you don't know what to do with it, right?
That's exactly it. That's where we were sitting. That's where I'm sitting as an individual. That's where so many companies we speak to are sitting.
Yeah.
I think everybody, honestly, in the world, because for the last 10 years, we hear data is the new oil. So we record everything.
Yeah.
And we hold on to everything. I think AI is the first time we're able to actually make use of any of it.
So maybe if the founder of Glean is out there, maybe this would be a great acquisition target. You know, just saying. I think also something that you told me that I found really impressive is that this is a pretty new company, right? Yeah. Tell me about the timeline and like kind of how this thing came together.
Oh, man. The timeline effectively was me going to a number of my friends who
Yeah.
I really respected.
Yeah.
Some very, very smart people who were already doing things. That's the other problem with wanting to work with really smart people, is that they're never not doing things.
Yeah.
So everyone's always in the middle of something and saying, hey, this is the thing that's occupied me for a very, very long time, even
Yeah.
during my time at Graywing,
Yeah.
because we started seeing the sparks of AGI level promise that models could do this one day. This was during 3.5, even GPT-2 days.
Yeah.
We went, oh, okay. Because until then, I went, it takes human level general intelligence, fluid intelligence to do the data work.
Yeah.
Because there's no fixed set of rules that you can follow.
Yeah.
It takes humans looking at something to go, hey, that's a typo. Somebody messed that up. Or that's a real problem
Yeah.
or something else, right?
Yeah.
So I can get that out of my head, went to a bunch of people. We started really going at it in November.
November of last year, right?
November of last year, but we just got buried in ops for a little too long because we operate a little bit as a hybrid company between Singapore and the US. And so, which is pretty uncommon for companies to do day one.
Yeah.
So we didn't fit any existing hole for a lot of governmental bank systems. There was no
Yeah.
problem with us at all.
Yeah.
But you're either a large company that's trying to be hybrid,
Yeah.
or you're a small company that's starting up.
Yeah.
We didn't fit either hole, so that took a little while.
I see.
But we properly got going in sort of mid-Jan.
Yeah.
So it's been a few months.
Wow. I mean, amazing progress, honestly, right? Start in November, get started and, raise your round, get customers, everything like that in what, like 2-3 months?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Pretty insane. I mean, I kind of want to ask about that decision because obviously, before you were based in Singapore, Graywing was in Singapore, and now this company is kind of between Singapore and US. And, when you go to Silicon Valley, obviously it feels different, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's something in the air, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about the decision, maybe AI ecosystems? Like why did you decide to actually go back to the US? Do you feel like that's a better decision to build this type of company there? Yeah.
That's a really good question. I think companies kind of get made in process. And so even Graywing was built in so many different places,
Yeah.
right? Because the people there, Graywing was a fully remote company for a very, very long time. And then we switched to slightly hybrid, but it was still pretty remote. So
Yeah.
the concept that was Graywing, the company that was Graywing got built in so many different places. There definitely is something in the air
Yeah.
in SF. I think you just have that congregation, and it comes from primarily having this massive change consistently happening, right? I think we saw during the sort of 2020 days,
Yeah.
COVID days post that as well, we saw stabilizing, or maybe I was seeing it because of my vantage point, commoditizing software, right? The floor wasn't changing. So it was all about operationally, how could you trim more capital out of the system? How could you improve your margins? How could you sell better than somebody else? Today, the capabilities keep changing pretty consistently. So staying on top of that is an incredibly hard, very time-consuming job to begin with. And I think physical proximity of just being in the right place makes a huge difference. I think the analog that I have is a lot of the early YouTubers, for example, that I grew up watching would talk about being in the same place and going, hey, we'd catch up for dinner.
Yeah.
And I see the exact same thing happening now in SF, is someone would say a sentence that would change the trajectory of your company.
Wow.
Because they knew that. Someone would go, hey, that, don't do that. Like Claude likes XML,
Ah.
right? Use XML. Or someone else would go, hey, because we just discovered this and I just ended up saying this to a bunch of people. Hey, streaming YAML is better. Nobody's using it, so you should try that. And it's either redirected all of what you're doing, or it's shaved weeks off of you having to rediscover and make those. So I think that's part of the reason why people are congregating. I mean, on top of that, I think the US is also an early adopter market for a lot of technology.
Of course.
So when it comes to customers, It's also the world's largest investment market at almost
course.
any stage.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of other value in there. But
Yeah.
just in terms of things being in the air and needing to be there, every single time I've been in SF, what we're building has changed.
Wow.
How we're building it has changed for the better.
Wow. I love that. Actually, most people when they talk about SF, they think about, okay, like all the VCs are there, Sand Hill Road, a lot of engineers, but actually it's about this concept of maybe serendipity, right? Like
Yeah.
increasing the surface area of your luck, you run into people at coffee shops and then
That's
maybe
exactly it.
you hire your rock star engineer and then, maybe it changes your company as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's also just that knowledge, really.
Interesting.
Serendipity, definitely, and the people are amazing. But in a lot of cases, because this industry, this space, I would say, is 2 years old,
I
right?
see.
2 to 3 years old.
Yeah.
It's just on the other side of the API wall, using models for applications. And so because it's that young, we haven't had the time to put in place what computer science had, what physics has,
Yeah.
which is how do you disseminate information? How do you teach people things? How do you train people up? How do we communicate? That doesn't exist. And even today, the AI space largely communicates over Twitter algorithms, a few wonderfully run, but largely just newsletters.
yeah.
And then mostly just chats with people, just
Right.
coffee
WhatsApp groups or
Yeah.
those
So
kind of things.
billion-dollar companies are being built off of information just delivered on those 3 channels.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's putting yourself in the flow of information, right?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. How does that compare to Singapore?
Singapore is moving forward, I would say. Moving quite forward. I think it's a little hurt by the fact that there is that massive pull to the US. But as a country, as a space for these things to exist, I think Lorong is a wonderful initiative, and the people are genuinely great. I think Singapore is a very, very useful place to have a foot in if you're an AI company. Because I think a large chunk of the growth for AI companies, both from a consumer perspective and also from a COGS perspective, is going to come from Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia just operates very differently. I think today, as far as AI is concerned, the core values of AI are a little bit closer to the West than Southeast Asia, but I think it swings back very quickly. Because today, because there's so much capital being flushed into the system from all fronts, no one's belt tightening, no one is looking at true scalability.
Yeah.
Everyone's happy to use some of that capital to grow or sort of collect users,
I see.
which doesn't always necessarily fit with Southeast Asian enterprises and how they function.
I see.
But I think that changes. I think that because it always has.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm also very curious. For you, you're a CTO, right? And now there's a lot of AI tools. And before you were CTO at your previous company, I'm just curious, how does your workflow or how's the way that you build a company and the way that you run your tech team, has that changed as well?
It has changed. I don't think it's changed enough. It has changed massively, and I still don't think it's changed enough. Because it's still genuinely crazy to me that the things that would take a lot of us to do
Yeah.
can now be done in an afternoon.
Yeah.
And so the workflows have all changed. The way that we function has all changed. The same level as the introduction of the personal computer, really. Because and I even if I'm just looking at it from a pure CTO standpoint, a lot of the work used to be needed to be written by hand. And so then the verification wasn't as strong.
Yeah.
Now I think everything's switched over to a build and then verify workflow. Right, very much so.
I
And
see.
tooling now needs different kinds of organizational environments to support.
Yeah.
Right? How do you get, and I'm guilty of this myself as well. It can be very easy to get overwhelmed. And so there's a lot of tooling flying around. How do you split time between trying something that could potentially accelerate the work you're doing?
Yeah.
Because there's 300 of those
Yeah.
and one of them works, and actually doing your work, right? And so this has also made it way harder for startups. The biggest problem with a startup early on, for anybody, I would say, is feature loading and distractions.
Yeah.
It's doing all the stuff that you don't need to be doing,
Sure.
like that, like red herrings,
Yeah.
and just feature loading the hell out of it. That just got easier, right? That just got like 1,000 times easier.
Yeah.
So that's something that we battle with. So both as a company and how you build product and how you operate in the macro, but also how individuals function inside of a team. That's all changed quite a bit.
What are the tooling that you found super helpful so far?
I think the first one for us is we use raw models just a lot,
Okay.
and because you can just get so much capability out of it. So
Yeah.
we're largely looking for, again, small team, right? So win-wins across the board, right?
Yeah.
So I think using raw models like both API and chat as much as possible,
Yeah.
still offers the best ROI across the board for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And then move to tooling because in a lot of cases, models will move faster than the tools themselves. So you are keeping up with the capabilities.
I see.
Two, especially if you're an AI company, the more people inside the company are more fluent with how models work,
Yeah.
their quirks, their positives, their negatives, their frustrations, what they're not good at, the easier it will be for you to execute and sort of move forward as a company, right? So you're doing that as well. Third, models honestly can do just quite a bit today,
Yeah.
right? So we do use things like Cursor.
Yeah.
We do use things like Windsurf. But we used to use things for meeting recordings and sort of like transcribing things and sort of pulling information out. Now we just use models, just use native models and end up building it because
Wow.
that floor keeps changing. We do open source. We are now using a lot of the tools that we use are our own. So we've open sourced all of those.
Wow.
So those are also available, but they're not necessarily designed
Yeah.
to be consumed that easily. So
Yeah.
you'll probably see our personal quirks in there.
Yeah.
But they're out there.
That's very cool. Has the way that you approach hiring, especially engineers, in this very leveraged tool kind of ecosystem, has that changed as well?
It has. It
Okay.
has quite.
And yeah, I'm just curious, like how, like what do you maybe look for now when you hire some engineers?
So there's a few things, but I'd say that the one that's at the very top of that line is it can be best described as fluidity,
Yeah.
right? Ability to pick up new tools very quickly and sort of change paradigms very quickly, because I think that's the world we're going into, right? It used to we used to need to be incredibly good at long division, but post the introduction of the calculator,
Yeah.
it was your ability to use the calculator and work at a higher level of abstraction. I'm not saying we're there yet,
Yeah.
but we are absolutely headed there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So today, being able to do assisted code review,
Yeah.
to be able to spin up proof of concepts really quickly and sort of test across different branches before you move to simple production, being able to use and have a very strong understanding of deep research tools is critical because it's like the calculator. You will just see a huge delta between people who are fluent in those tools and people who are not fluent in those tools.
Wow.
And most of the time, when you look at it, you're not looking at those tools specifically.
Yeah.
You're looking at ability to pick up tools as they come up.
I see.
Because I can promise you in a month from now,
It will change, right?
there will be something else,
Yeah.
right? That works even better.
Interesting. So in your hiring process, I know some AI companies they're
Yeah.
like, hey, no AI coding tools, anything like that. Like it seems like you have the opposite approach, right? Where you actually want to see people's ability to use these tools.
So yes, and
Yeah.
so it's really what we're looking for at a bit higher of a meta level. When I end up talking to people, is
Yeah.
a tool that you have never seen before. What is your thinking process like in evaluating it? Right? Do you have a good enough conception of who you are as a person and how
Yeah.
you work that you can look at something and go, I could probably fold that in, or I couldn't, right? And I've seen that consistently across early adopters, good early adopters that I look up to and
Yeah.
respect, that they have an idea.
Yeah.
Even if you just made up a hypothetical tool,
Yeah.
I could present it to you and you would be able to tell me if that's something that you could use, what you might use it for, how you might fold it into your workflow, and how you would test it to see if it's good enough today to be able to use.
Interesting.
Right.
Interesting.
If you don't, you end up also just, and that's why I completely get the frustration that a lot of people have. If you don't come at it in a structured way, you end up just wasting a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that's also where this sort of sea of disillusionment that I consistently run into sometimes with AI tools is that you end up wasting a lot of time on the wrong tool for the wrong part of things. Maybe because you keep hearing that Cursor is really good.
Right. But you don't know how to evaluate actually the efficiency of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then you waste a lot of time. You don't think it's very good.
Yeah.
But everyone else might be telling you that it is very good.
Yeah.
And so it's all of that.
That's fascinating. I want to zoom out a little bit more, maybe on the company building side of things, right? It's interesting because you chose to build a almost like infrastructure company, right, instead of an application layer company, which is in itself like a pretty big challenge, right? You know, most people are like, just build an application layer. What prompted this decision, and how did you think about maybe competitive dynamics? And obviously, there's a lot of big guys and a lot of money thrown around, and especially more U.S. companies tackling this problem as opposed to maybe coming from Southeast Asia as well. Yeah.
I want to pretend that this was this was a bigger plan,
Yeah.
and that there was a massive it was a causal chain that led there,
Yeah.
right? which is this is the problem that has plagued my life for a long time.
Yeah.
Both at a conceptual level as an individual, I'm surrounded by data that I collect that I can't make use of,
Yeah.
that I'm just holding on to. And I've written about it almost like 7 years ago. I was writing about the fact that you can't put data together, and that's a big problem.
Okay.
And my advice then was you need better organizational processes to organize it before it ever goes anywhere,
I see.
because you will never get it back out.
I see.
It's a little short-sighted, but my argument then was that you're never going to get it back out once it goes in
Yeah.
an unorganized form.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about it for a long time. And when we started doing this work somewhat at Graywing, I also started writing about it a lot and open sourcing a lot of the work that we did, going, hey, somebody pick up on it, because this is a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
And I would really like to be the consumer of this product, both as an individual and as a CTO. Not that much happened.
Okay.
Right? But what also happened is just a large number of, even just from little tech demos and GPT 3.5, bad reliability, even though I said that, lots of people reached out from around the world, from all different industries, going, hey, this is a problem that we have right now. We'll take any solution.
Wow.
Right? So automotive companies reached out, right? People dealing with data sheets, right? Large-scale semiconductor manufacturers. So many people reached out going, this is the problem that we have, right? And so because Graywing was in a pretty stable place, that made me also go, well, this is a problem that somebody needs to solve. And I kept talking about it, and I kept talking about it, which then meant that there were also people who offered to fund something like that, if that's something that I did. So I kind of transitioned out, thought about it for a little bit, took some time off, and just after sort of maybe I didn't get as long of a break as I wanted to. Maybe I got 2 months. You never get as long of a break as you want to.
Yeah.
I got 2 months, and this was now maybe 7 to 8 months into a lot of this, and I went, is anyone doing it now?
Wow.
No one was doing it then.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it because I'd like to solve this problem, and I'd like a solution to exist. And even today, I don't see many people doing it.
Wow.
I think because it's a very, very hard problem. I've now spoken to people who were trying to do it at one point, and we all kind of agree that this is a really, really hard problem to solve. Just trying to put structured data together.
Yeah.
Because the margin for error is so razor thin. You can't get a date wrong. You can't take a number and add a decimal point. It doesn't work, right? So trying to get it right at scale for large data is a very, very hard problem.
Got it. Another, I think, interesting company building quirk maybe that I noticed is that, you guys have almost like 2 locations, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of remote from day one. And I think a lot of the now conventional wisdom that VCs say is, you should be in person, in SF, like all of those, right? So can you tell me a little bit more about that choice and, yeah.
I think that is partly came out of the situation that we were in.
Yeah.
I think we have considered moving entirely to the US,
Yeah.
or staying entirely in Singapore.
Yeah.
But for the time being, I think the hybrid model works really well for us because it lets us access both of those markets, work with people. But I am one of those people who is leaning towards, especially for an early stage company, you can't get the kind of joint decision making and disagreements and progress remote that you do in person, right? It's just better to be in person.
Yeah.
So that's something we're working on.
Got it. Okay. I think the last question is, when I look back on, kind of what you've told us about your career, right? It's just super interesting because the type of problems that you want to solve, right? Whether it be detecting fires or, international shipping, or now with this, right? A lot of it is quite maybe niche or a little bit esoteric, right?
Right.
So I think, to the young people out there who maybe, hey, I want to be a successful one day, a successful entrepreneur like yourself one day. What advice do you have? Like, is it around following your curiosity? Is it around finding these hard problems to solve? Like, what advice do you have for them to, be able to tackle these?
I mean, I hope I'm not answering that too broadly and too far in the meta. I think the biggest one often is you run into encounters in your life, serendipity to a large extent, and certain things where you realize that you're an outlier, you're having an outlier moment, right? I think there's a lot of value in those if you can recognize those, right?
What's an outlier moment? Yeah.
An outlier moment would be me talking to Nick, for example, and realizing that, hey, here's an incredibly smart person, Nick Clark, our CEO from Graywing, he's an incredibly smart person who's telling me about an industry and certain problems. And I actually think that what I know can be a value add, and that what I don't know isn't a big enough negative. That trade-off doesn't definitely work. This is an outlier moment, right? There are so many moments where you realize that you might be one of the very few people who are in that position at this point, and that ends up becoming an unfair advantage,
I see.
right? The FIRE system came out of me doing an internship at a semiconductor company
Yeah.
in Singapore, and they went, hey, well, these are the systems, this is what we have, these are some of the problems, I want you guys to look at it. And then I kind of, no, I don't know if it was me, I think it might have been someone else in the room, honestly, realized that, hey, this is a very weird team that's sitting around here. There's a mechanical guy, there's an electrical guy, there's a CS guy who has some electrical background. And then you just want to lean into that. And I genuinely think that there are very few things that can't be learned with enough time.
Oh.
I say that as someone who learned like 1% of shipping, but still, right?
Yeah. Wow. And what advice do you have for these, people who they want to place themselves in more of these outlier moments, right? Is it moving to certain locations? Is it meeting new people? Like, how do you create these outlier moments in the first place?
That's a really tough one. I would say with the ones that when I look back, the pattern that I see is just being excited about things.
I see.
Generally just being excited about things. My longest and closest friend, who is now working with me at Southbridge, right? That friendship came out of us meeting at a party. And I went, and that also led to me working there and me going, hey, what do you do? And he goes, insurance. I work in insurance. And I went, that is incredibly interesting. Tell me about it. Like, I really want to hear everything about it.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Like, that's still me. And he went, I will. And he pulled me off to sit down and went, let me sketch out the entirety of how the insurance industry works and how risk moves around.
Wow.
And how this is done.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It was the beginning of my time in reinsurance. And it has now led to us working together. And he's one of the smartest people, honestly, one of the smartest AI users of AI and smartest people in AI that I know today, right? And so that all came because of that question and that answer, the way it was given.
Normally, when people pull you outside at a party, you usually don't ask about insurance. But maybe
exactly.
we'll follow your example next time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Rishi. I think the last section that we usually like to do is a quick rapid fire question. So just say whatever comes to your mind, right?
Okay.
So the first one is like, what is your favorite tech or AI tool that you like using recently?
Cursor's been crazy.
Cursor.
Yeah.
Okay. Second one is, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh man, the best piece of advice I most recently got is the best decision is often better than longer analysis that doesn't lead to anything.
And is it because you get more data and
Exactly. Actually, you know what? The best advice, this was reframed, came from him. His name's Jay, by the way. Which is, you're never gonna stop being wrong.
Yeah.
Be wrong faster and iterate.
It's the velocity of your mistakes, right?
Yeah, except that you're going to be wrong a little bit faster and learn to iterate.
That's amazing. Next one is, if you're not doing what you are doing now, maybe as a CTO, what do you think you'd be doing?
If I wasn't working on this, I think there was no choice for me but to work on these things. I probably would have been working on the exact same problem, just in my own home.
Oh, wow.
It was, some things show up in your life and they leave you no choice but to work on them. So this is the problem that's plagued me for most of my life. I would have just worked on this.
Wow.
If it wasn't a company, probably just would have been me with a laptop trying to do something.
Amazing. Yeah. And last one is, for what are you most grateful for in life?
I'm genuinely grateful for just all the people. I somehow managed to surround myself with people who've been incredibly supportive, smart, helpful. But I'm also just generally grateful for people and us and humanity. I think and again, this is a vantage point thing, but I think we are also still living in one of the best times for humanity. And the fact that the fact that I was alive when we created the first general intelligence, I'm just very, very thankful for that.
Yeah. And hopefully, I think your company may be contributing to be a part of that as well.
We're happy to be a part of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I guess for those viewers who maybe want to learn more about you or found more about your company, where can they find you?
So I'm on Twitter. The company website is southbridge.ai.
Okay.
We have a little bit of information there, but we also have a blog. Most of the work that we do, both as tooling that we build for ourselves and all of the things that we find and learn about AI, that we work on, we publish almost immediately.
Okay.
So if you go to our blog, there's just a lot of information, not just about what we do, but about, hey, what models might be good at doing something like this, or we learned this yesterday. So it's a wonderful place to be.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for your time, man. And glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, tune in for the next episode. Thank you.